welcome to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. This is episode 171. My name is Aaron, and with me as always is Dave and Fredo. How we doing, guys?
Doing good.
Doing good.
Dave just said he was eating very spicy tacos, so he's warning of nasal issues, but is it really the nasal issues we need to worry about after eating spicy tacos?
Hopefully we'll have at least an hour. Should be fine.
So anyway, this evening we're going to be talking about the most recent episode of Ahsoka. This one was called The Shadow Warrior. I kind of like it. How do you guys, I kind of like it. What do you guys think about not releasing the name of the episode until you actually watch the episode?
It was an interesting choice. I was like, is there going to be a name? I didn't know.
I mean, just in general, that's happened every week. It's kind of interesting. So
this was the first time I got to watch it like right away. So
cool.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, it's always interesting because it's something that started with The Mandalorian. I mean, we don't get the title of the episode before it drops. We get no trailer before it. Like other shows will show you next week, this is what you're going to expect. None of these shows ever give us anything. And we just kind of accept that it's just, okay, digest what you got before you ask for more, kind of a thing.
So, like I said, we're going to be talking about this recent episode, which was, spoiler alert, it was a fantastic episode. Oh my goodness. It's kind of funny because, again, well, this morning as I was getting ready, I'm listening to a podcast, and they're very positive about the episode. Brittany and I were talking about it, and I said, there's things you can nitpick. I said, but even I get to be a little bit more nitpicky than the two of you, and even I have been like, I don't have a problem, Now, if put a gun to my head, I can nitpick on this episode on a couple things. I think this was the first episode where the volume showed itself in a couple places, but nothing that made me go like, like you just saw the guy with, khaki shorts in the background, or something like that. It was just like, okay, I can see here. And there was a couple shots of, I think it's like when the X-Wing and the Ghost took off that just seemed like I was on Star Tours. But I mean, again, that's getting like, put a gun to my head. Those are the things I have to come up with. The rest of it, it's just, it's fantastic writing. It's fantastic scoring. So not to be just, a big shill, but I mean, it's really good. So each episode has gotten better, honestly.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. And I may have a little opening salvo when we start talking about the episode, but along these lines, people can differ about it, but it's been good so far.
Well, I tell you what, before we get diving into that, let's do some trivia, because then we have like one little bit of news. I was almost going to say it's a rumor, but I think it's more news given who said it. So that's kind of interesting. So a little bit of teaser there. But a little Star Wars trivia here. Fredo, to you.
Okay.
Who stares with red ringed yellow eyes out a red and black face? Who stares with red ringed yellow eyes out of a red and black face?
Oh.
Okay.
Darth Maul.
That is Darth Maul.
Yeah, I had to think about it for a hot minute, and then I went, oh, okay. Yeah, the red and black face. Maul.
Get your colors straight. Yeah.
All right. Dave, to you, what aliens does C-3PO deride as disgusting creatures?
Jawas.
It is Jawas. And would they really be the aliens in that?
I don't know. There are a few indigenous species there, right? A couple, at least.
All right. To me, who neglects to inform Darth Sidious that the Jedi ambassadors have escaped? Who neglects to inform Darth Sidious that the Jedi ambassadors have escaped? Well, that would be Newt Gunray. Yes. because he don't need to know. So,
You
all
don't
right.
need to know.
No. All right. Well, we're stretched and warmed up now. Um, let's dive into some news here because this is kind of hot off the presses. This happened today, right?
Yep, came out today in Variety, which is interesting because, well, given that the SAG and WGA strikes are still happening, you're not getting the usual cavalcade of news about shows and projects and whatnot. Right, right now would be getting all the news about Skeleton Crew and Andor finishing production and all the other stuff. But anyway, we got a bit of news about Lando, which Variety broke. So apparently, Stephen Glover, who's Donald Glover's brother and writing partner, was doing the Pablo Torre Fansao podcast, and during it, he says, "quote It's not even a show. The idea right now is to do a movie. Right now, because of the strike, it's kind of like telephone, all of the information. So that's as much information as he could provide, but according to Stephen Glover, who is allegedly co-writing this now movie with Donald Glover. The Lando project is no longer a Disney Plus Star Wars show; it's a Star Wars movie.
See, so here's where Aaron was the stereotypical Star Wars fan because my initial reaction was, "Aw, I wanted the Calrissian Chronicles." Which was never promised to us, which was just, our, wild idea that would just have been wonderful. And so for a hot minute I was sad, but then I was like, well, that's dumb to be mad about something that was never promised to me. So, so like I said, but it was my gut reaction. I still think it would be kind of fun to see that as a Disney Plus series, but this makes sense because Iger has said we're not doing so much Disney Plus.
Yeah, just from the standpoint of what he's interested in. He wants the Star Wars brand to be a big deal whenever something comes out that it's going to make them a lot of money. Because I mean, let's face it, they paid a lot of money for it. They know that they can get the returns, and it kind of makes sense that they would think, well, wait a minute, we bought this to make movies, we didn't buy this to make TV shows, and to there's an opportunity to put a project headlined by, let's face it, an African American, a black star, front and center, that you can go anywhere you want to with the character, and uh, it allows them to hit a whole bunch of stuff that they want to hit. So, kind of makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's just we're gonna get what we're gonna get, right? And it's like Obi-Wan would be a movie. No, it's a TV show. No, it's a movie. It's the same thing with this. It's whatever form it takes. I'm going to consume it and probably enjoy it a great deal. I wouldn't be surprised if they went back to the gag either of including the Carlisian Chronicles, as like a throwaway joke or
So
just
here's
something because it's just it was such a it's such a distillation of his character. It really just nails him perfectly.
so here's the thing. So just being a little bit of a pot stirrer here for a second. Um, is Lando really that big of a character to carry a movie on his own shoulders? And because we met him halfway through Empire Strikes Back, and he screwed over all of our friends, and then he was in minutes of uh, Return of the Jedi. Yes, he blew up the second Death Star, but that's my thing is that it's kind of, again, it was like I could see if it was a like if it was a TV thing where it's like you rely on, there's a different adventure every week, and it wasn't like one long drawn out story. It was just like a Lando adventure here, a Lando adventure there, another Lando adventure here with supporting people. Is he big enough to carry a movie on his own?
I would argue that he's important. For roughly 2 decades there, he was the only representation in Star Wars that anybody of color had. Um,
Well, I give you
and
that, but
for
I'm just talking about the character in the story.
no, I don't want to undersell that aspect. Um, Look at Black Panther. Just like the biggest superhero movie ever until Endgame came along, and then but like based on whatever metric you want to use, like domestically, I think Black Panther was bigger. Um, so it's important to have a black fronted Star Wars movie, and people will support that. Now, the character himself, I'd say it's all about timing. The reason Solo didn't work is because they messed the timing up.
But to your point, then I would argue that Finn would make much more sense to have a movie if we're going to talk about if one of the primary goals is to have the representation. Finn is a much more fleshed out character, and one of the solid heroes from the sequel trilogy that you could definitely put a movie on him. That's what I'm just saying. Is the character Lando enough?
You're underselling the actor factor in that. Yeah, Fredo wanted to.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say I agree entirely with Dave, but I also think part of the interesting aspect is you don't know what the story's going to be. I mean, you figure it's going to have to be some type of underworld story, some type of uh, backstabbers and double crossing, and a less um, a Star Wars story told more towards the side of Andor as opposed to towards the side of Ahsoka, because that's the character that Lando is. He's a character who's kind of not in the light, not in the dark. He's not quite good guy, but he's also not quite the bad guy, particularly at the point where Donald Glover's playing him. So I think it creates an interesting opportunity because you're telling a different kind of Star Wars story. You're not having to tell there's not going to be a Jedi popping in at the last minute to save the day.
I like it how you
And I
told
think
me
that,
that we don't know what the story is going to be. Then you tell me what the story is going to be. So just
oh
saying,
no,
just
well,
saying. You guys
what
are
I meant
kind
to
of
say,
dodging my question about the character of Lando. I get your points.
Lando can carry a movie. Lando can carry a
Yeah,
movie.
King
Why?
Gary movie.
Simple,
Why?
simple. Why? Why?
Why not Wedge?
Because he's
Why not? I mean, again, why
why
not? Why
not
not?
let
Why not? If we're going to take
you
Dave's premise of the representation, then why not Finn? I'm just
could,
saying. I mean, it's not like
I think
Donald
with
Glover is. I mean, yes, Donald Glover. I loved it. I'm being a pot stirrer here though, but I'm trying to pin
yeah.
you down on the question.
The
Lando
wheels
is
are
not.
already in motion. That is the answer.
For what?
They have
That's not
Glover,
what
a
I
major
asked. That's not what
star
I asked.
on. They have
But
Glover, a major star on the line, and
but
he's
it's
into
also
it.
but it's also I think if you're gonna tell a story about Finn, you have to start to do that legwork, so to speak. But it's also might bump into the movie that Daisy Ridley is going to be doing coming back. We don't know. The advantage that you do by having a Lando story, one, it's an established character that people like, people know, easy to sell. And number two, it's an opportunity to tell a different kind of story where you can bring in Boba Fett, you can bring in Jabba the Hutt, you can bring in all these other characters, or you can tell a completely different story that has nothing to do with any of them. So you can't, I mean, there's not saying you can't have a Finn movie, but for right now, they're choosing to go, we had this project kind of in the ether. Let's wrap it up rather than TV show. Boom, let's make a movie. Let's also face it, Donald Glover may not commit to another TV show after doing however many seasons of Atlanta, but you can get him for a movie.
And they're right now they're just writing this thing. Like that doesn't mean anything in Star Wars right now. Like this movie may not get made. It may happen 10 years from now. I mean, we don't know. Um, to your question, Lando's a great character. Love Lando. Yeah, he deserves a movie. So does everybody.
I mean, I love Lando from the Solo movie. Lando from
Absolutely.
the original trilogy is just kind of a side character. I mean, honestly, it was he didn't have a lot going on. So I mean, that's like I said, I'm just stirring the pot there a little bit. That I don't. That would be I don't know if my gut. Yeah, I'm like you, Dave. It will be a Star Wars thing that I will go out and I will enjoy. But if you're trying to if you want, the general populace to go out and see a new Star Wars movie, Lando: The Battle of Tanab is probably, I mean, that's rolling the dice a little bit. You know what I mean? It's. I'm just saying. I don't know. It was just something that popped in my head. So,
I think
thank you for playing
timing is
Stir
really
the Pot.
important because the timing of it is gonna determine all of this, right? Like if you had released Black Panther on the heels of Iron Man 2, would it have done well? Would it have done as well? But they built it up over time, and then they gave it its own window where they didn't like rush it out on the heels of some other uh, Avengers movie, and it had an opportunity to succeed, and then Solo was the exact opposite of that. So I think like it's apples and oranges, but these are the kinds of decisions that I think would allow it to be a success. You give it those other three movies that we've been talking about. You give it those movies build up the anticipation and the excitement. If you don't release it 4 months after the fact, you give it an actual window for it to breathe a little bit. I think it would have a very good chance at succeeding.
Dave's bigger point, which is the point I keep stressing over and over. Disney, Lucasfilms at some point has to get off the pot and deliver something. Whether it's the Lando movie, the Taika Waititi movie, the Sean Levi movie, you take your pick, whatever project it is. At some point, they got to stop announcing stuff and delivering stuff. And it can't just be another Disney Plus project. They actually have to do the work to get back in theaters. And I know right now it's kind of difficult, but yeah, announce all you like, but until it's a movie you can actually pay hard-earned American dollars to walk into a theater to go see, this is all nebulous. We might all be whistling Dixie.
Now, I will tell you that if people are watching the Ahsoka series, that the Filoni movie will be one that I'll definitely fork over money to go see, because this latest episode, um, probably some of the and I'm going to tee up Dave here, probably some of the best Star Wars that I've seen in a while. And it was thoughtful, it was poignant, it was just very, very good. And if it's a signal of what's to come, with that, whatever his movie is going to be, which sounds like going to be the culmination of all these Disney Plus shows, then I think we're in for a treat. So
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, if I've been teed up properly
you're
here,
teed up.
the thing that I see from some people that is like they push back on the idea that this is great Star Wars, and I think like that's okay. I think that's worth addressing at the outset here, right? Which is that the three of us on this show tonight are going to gush over this, and we're going to just love on it, and it's okay for it to not have worked for everyone. And I think like this is the thing that where people get like all snippy with each other online about these things. It's like not all Star Wars is for everyone. It's like I'll see a trailer for like the kid cartoon on Disney Plus, the shorts, or and I'll just like there was something the other day. I think it was like Ewoks relaxing tones or something like that. I was just like, nope, checked out immediately because it's just like
Ewoks,
that's
relaxing. Is that like on the Calm app or something?
no, it was
Birds
like
chirping, and then eventually
I think it was like ASMR stuff. I don't know. It was like I don't even know what it was all about. I didn't want to click on it because I'm like, that's not for me. But actually, now that I mention it, maybe I am a little curious. But it's I can go and I can look at something at the outset and decide for myself, I don't like that. Or I can watch it an episode or two, give it a try, decide, it's not for me. But what I wanted to say about this show is it's an absolute gift for people who have been watching Clone Wars and Rebels. Like 100%. Like if you've watched those shows and you've cared about those characters, this show, with the amount of care that they've put into it, from the writing to the casting to the acting to the effects to the music to the set design to the costuming, etc., 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 everything is top notch. It's A level. Now, again, like you could quibble over little things, like Darren was talking about earlier. Like there's this moment that looks like it might be the volume, or I'm not a big fan of Hera's portrayal, etc. There could have been so much more of that kind of discussion surrounding this show, because we talked about this a lot leading up into this show, that the nerds expectation level for this show, based on what they'd previously seen, if they didn't get it right, we were going to flame the hell out of it. And they've gotten it right. I mean, at least, like, again, reasonable minds can differ. You may not like it, but to the point that there's a quality, there's an underlying quality, care, attention to detail, and I'd even say love or affection for the material, for the source material. And it's obvious. And so, like, when we are going on and on and on about how great this show is, that's where we're coming from, because we watch those series and this is personal to us. And it's just that much more important that they get it right. And for people who have been watching for the last, 15 years, they're getting it right. And so I wanted to say that at the outset before we got into like some of the details and analysis.
Just to piggyback of what David just said, because it's a good point and it's a fair point that needs to be stated. It's interesting to me seeing all the reactions every time a new property comes out, how people are quick to rise and says, Star Wars is back. This is the real Star Wars. Happened after The Mandalorian. Okay, it didn't happen after Book of Boba Fett, but definitely happened after Andor. Everybody's like, "This is the real Star Wars. We finally got the Star Wars back that we got in the '70s." And they're saying the same thing again right now with Ahsoka. And I find that interesting. It's like, okay, why do you feel the urge to announce that Star Wars, quote unquote, is back? Like, no, it's just you're
Probably
getting it.
not the same people who are saying that. It depends on your vintage.
True, true. But the point is also that you get the people who are like, oh, this wasn't really my Star Wars, or, the sequel trilogy wasn't my Star Wars, or whatever. And it's like, people want to latch on to something. And I'm just like, they're just doing good
Very,
TV or good storytelling. And that's what you're going to, if you give it time, it'll show itself out whether it's good or not. And ultimately, whether you like it or not, that's subjective. Whether you think this is your Star Wars or not, subjective. But I find it somewhat laughable. People are so quick to rush to either denounce it or defend it. Like, give it time, let it breathe. It's a story. We got to sit with the original trilogy for what, 20 some odd years before a moment of the prequels ever came up.
yeah.
So we have to be comfortable in letting stories breathe. And a lot of times we want to rush to declare it the greatest of the lamest. And it's like,
Well,
stop, enjoy.
I've said it before. I mean, we're nobody really comes into Star Wars in their mid 30s. It's like we're all introduced to Star Wars, like when we were 5, 6, 7, when we're, kids. And so when we get into our mid 30s and we have our mortgages and health insurance and life hitting us over the head, and a new Star Wars comes out, it's a chance to escape. And if it doesn't make you feel like you are 5, 6, 7, whatever again, then you have that visceral reaction. for right or for wrong. But yeah, I mean, the other part of this though is that the amount of prequel hate that there was, and I will admit this, is that I mean the prequels are never my favorites. Um, but and I've said that before. You know, I said I liked episode one and episode two and episode three need to go to college and get a job. You know, they're not my favorites. I love them, but they're not my favorites. But the Clone Wars made me appreciate the prequels more. Um, Rebels made me appreciate the prequels more, and this series is making me appreciate it, all of that stuff, even more. So, so yeah, it's. I mean, I'm with you, and it's like, and the thing is that the reason why it's getting the attention that it is Dave Filoni is at the helm. First of all, I'm going to say Dave Filoni is like chairman of the board. I would prefer him to do all the Star Wars for the foreseeable future, or at least have the head chair. You know, he is. He is. If you, by the way, okay. So Aaron's rant. What was it last week? Where it was like the documentary for Master and
Yeah.
Apprentice was coming out on Disney Plus. I was like, yay! It's 8 minutes long. Ugh, it was like 8 minutes for this documentary. But I mean, in the 8 minutes, they said some good stuff. That it was like there's a couple things. First of all, Dave is George is the master. Dave is his apprentice, and now Dave is becoming the master. I mean, it's obvious. And so, like I said, I would, if he's involved, I will breathe easy. Um, that being said, here's just a little thing for us to discuss, and I think this is a fair thing. When he said he had his opportunity to do the episode in season 2 of The Mandalorian, he said, "I want to do Ahsoka because I want to see if these things that I've been drawing, I can do this in live action." I understand that. I also understand doing an Ahsoka series because you've got to finish telling your story. What's going to be very telling is after he does this movie that combines all these things, can he give us new Star Wars again?
Mhm.
That's going to be the telling thing for his legacy. Because right now, yes, he is embracing, supporting, and championing the prequels and the Clone Wars and Rebels, 100%. Um, but will he be able to write that second album?
That's a really valid question. And like I think
And that's his
you
that's his
touched.
professional challenge. I mean, we all have
Huh,
that, you know.
yeah,
So sorry to step on you. I mean, that's it. That's I think that's just everybody goes through that. As like I said, the album. It's like you write your first album, and it's like, can we follow it up? Go ahead, Dave.
I think you touched on an important component of that question though a minute ago when you were talking about the prequels and your reaction to them and whether that was your personal vintage of Star Wars or not. And for a lot of people, it's not. Uh, didn't like it when it came out. Don't like it now. Will never like it. Um, and Filoni is rooted in that. That is that is where he cut his teeth. That is where he is embedded, and he's gonna have to get out of it at some point, probably. For Star Wars to really thrive, because there's always going to be a segment of the fan base that just will not
It's kind of like It's
engage.
kind of like Robert Plant collaborating with Alison Krauss. You know, I mean, to go from Led Zeppelin to bluegrass, you're gonna. I mean, that challenges you as a musician. You know, so yeah, you're right.
It's an it's an interesting question because sometimes that's the hardest part for a creator, where it's doing the next thing. It's because it's not like he's moving away from Star Wars entirely, but it's come up with the next story, come up with the next set part in the saga and the next piece of the universe, something completely different, whether it's thousands of years in the future, thousands of years in the past, whatever. But the idea being stop, moving on from characters that not only do you know inside and out, but that you love. That's sometimes the hardest part. Is part of the reason I think why George R. R. Martin keeps struggling to finish his A Song of Ice and Fire saga. It's because he's in love with these characters, and the idea of finally letting them go it's so difficult for him as a writer and a creator. And I think Dave Filoni at some point is going to have to reach that point where he goes, I'm not going to tell any more Ahsoka stories. There may be other Ahsoka stories, there won't be mine.
Well, and I would say, as my parting shot, he needs to step out of the prequel era. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so, but like I said, that being said, I think he can do it because if there's a walking encyclopedia of Star Wars, it's him. But again, his passion is, and again, we're all. It's like the in the Pearl Jam documentary, Stone Gossard was talking about how Eddie Vedder's like writing set lists, and he's watching the crowd just kind of starting to yawn a little bit, and he's like, just play a hit, let's just play a hit. It's like as it's easy to go to the things work for you. It's like I'm going to play this and it's going to be awesome and it's going to be solid, but you know, it's when you step out and take that chance and that you might fall on your face is when you grow. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. Like I said, that being said, if he's involved, I'm good. So, but with that, let's talk about this episode. Let's talk about this episode. And by the way, folks, we're going to skip over some stuff because most of the stuff with the New Republic, they just kind of created the ticking clock to kind of add a little bit of suspense to the episode, and really not much. We saw none of the bad guys. This was, but so the things we're going to talk about are really some of the heavy hitting things. However, there's a moment that I love, and we'll talk about later, where Carson Teva, the X-wing pilot, he was speaking for probably about 60% of the audience, I would say, at one point.
Briefly saying though, like none of the villains were here. I felt the villains have been the strongest part of this series so far, and this episode was able to succeed despite not having them. And I think that's a credit to what we saw. This was
Yep.
really good stuff.
So in my notes, I put, "Hi kids, I'm Hayden Christensen," because last week we speculated, like, are we in the world between worlds? Is that Anakin? Is it, people were speculating whether or not it might be the son from the Mortis arc and everything like that. Are we all in agreement? That's the spirit of Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, and I do want to shout out my wife for making a really good point on this, which was that we all kind of had our own theories about this, and she said, like, he called her Snips.
Well,
It's like,
I mean,
like that's a personal term of endearment, like that only really they would know.
but
And
I agree with that. And
yeah,
but I think there was something even more telling in that. I mean, because that is something that if it was just a figment of her imagination, that him calling her Snips would have made sense because he always called her Snips. The thing that made me sit up and go, "Oh, okay, Dave just told us," was when she said, "I will not fight you," and he said, "I've heard that before." That was Anakin speaking of Anakin about something that Ahsoka knew nothing about. That was the because Luke said, "I will not fight you." When he said, "I've heard that before," and then
yeah,
later
that
on,
that that clues you in that this is real, or at least
yeah,
like Anakin is manifesting himself
and it's
towards her.
and it's not a scroll that that only has recent memory type thing. It was so that was them without hitting us over the head with it. And I thought that was just a great line in there. But so
Yeah,
it seems to be that Ahsoka is having a near death experience, and the ghost of Anakin Skywalker, or the spirit of Anakin Skywalker, is there as her spirit guide at this point. And he offers her. He says, "I'm here to complete your training," and basically said, "You have a choice. You can either live or you can die." And yeah. So Fredo, you were going to say something?
yeah. No, I was just gonna say it's yeah, 'cause it's an interesting moment because at that point where he presents himself, you're thinking, okay, War Between Worlds, what's going on? But yeah, he makes it very clear that he's there almost not only as a guide, but also as a challenger, meaning he's there to test Ahsoka in a way in which she hasn't been tested probably since her days as a Padawan.
Yeah.
In a way that's completely different than any other test, any other challenge she's faced. Even the idea of fate when she faced him on Malachor as Vader, in real life in Rebel at the end of Rebel season 2. This is a completely different challenge. He is looking to see whether or not she is interested in continuing to live and fight, or if she's ready to lay down her sword in a way in which it means death. So he's coming up front and telling her. What's interesting is that she can't pick up on that at the outset.
And so what I dig about this is, I mean, all of it makes sense. Now that he says that in the last episode, I didn't expect to see you so soon. That says I didn't expect you to die this soon. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, so all these things just kind of it all makes sense, and and if the world between worlds is you know the force, if you will, it's the play is, so it makes sense that a force spirit would show up. So they start into a killer lightsaber duel. I mean, this is just some good stuff. Oh my goodness, we thought last week's was good with Balaam. This was good stuff. Um, and then she seems to get kind of the upper hand, and then he um, basically kicks her into, we could go into what, a Christmas Carol. I mean, he's like the ghost of Christmas past, and this is when things got interesting because we start getting some flashbacks. And um, how'd you guys feel when we get into the Dusty World? I think we're on Ryloth, and
Mm-hmm.
all these clone troopers come running through in the first
Yeah, because
sequence,
it's
and we've got
because it's
young
phase one
Ahsoka.
troopers.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
And
And
Anakin's wearing his
Anakin's wearing
armor.
that armor.
Yeah.
Yeah, that from the Clone Wars movie. Um, that always looks sort of silly. Um, but actually, it's very faithful and it works for him in these scenes. But yeah, you get taken back to when they first met, basically, and then her reluctance, it plays out over the course of this scene. It's like, well, I if I'm leading these men, they may die, and I may not want to do that. I don't feel good about feeling responsible for these people dying. And like his mantra again, like I may be wrong, I may be misremembering it. Forgive me because I only watched it the one time so far. But like you will fight or you will die. He's not saying you will live or you will die. He's saying you will fight or you will die. And he's presenting it in very black and white, dark side terms.
Well, and if we can put all this, like, because there's another Clone Wars flag. Well, they push into the Siege of Mandalore,
Mandalore.
but the whole, and so, like, what are these flashbacks teaching Ahsoka? And one of the things that caught me was when Anakin said, because Ahsoka said, "Is this what I'm going to have to teach my Padawan? Is how to fight?" And he said, "Do you even want to teach? Do you even want a Padawan?" And that was all of this to me is like, listen, Ahsoka, crap or get off the pot. You either need to commit to being a teacher and to commit to being a Jedi, or just throw your sword aside and join me in the Force. Quit, quit feeling sorry for yourself, and it's so all these, he said he had to train her unlike any other Jedi before her. He had to train her to be a warrior, not a keeper of the peace. It's one thing to be trained as, I'm just going to, you know, guard this, you know, random piece of grass, and then, or you have to, you know, take a post on a, on the front lines. So she had to be trained different than anybody else. But like I said, this whole thing I think was teaching her, like, you need to commit to Sabine. You need to quit worrying about, all the other stuff, because bad stuff's going to happen. And, just do it or don't. Do or do not. There is no try.
And I think this is one of the interesting aspects of what not having completed her training did for her. Because, this Force Ghost Anakin is correct. He was trained in the decade between or before the Clone Wars, so he got the old-fashioned Jedi training from Obi-Wan Kenobi, where we go around, we solve some problems, and then we're okay. We're just managing to keep everything kind of hunky dory. Whereas Ahsoka, from the very first moment he met her, he meets her in a battlefield. He meets her at the outset of the Battle of Ryloth, and that's all they know. They go on missions, they go on battlefields, they're leading clones, they are they are leaders or warriors in a war. And there's some conflict in Ahsoka about that aspect because everything the Jedi teach, peace, nonviolence, defense, not attack, did she honestly learn any of that? No. She learned you better pick up your sword, tell your men to come on and take that hill or take that field or find a way to get across that bridge because we need it, because we need to win this battle, because there's another battle up ahead that we got to fight. And it's an interesting juxtaposition because she has not been taught how to teach. In much the same way as I'm sure you have to learn how to be a teacher. It's one thing to be an expert on your field, it's another thing to learn how to pass that knowledge on down. Anakin really didn't get that, or if he got some of that from Obi-Wan, she got no, she has none of that training because all that got cut short by her decision to walk away from the Jedi Order when she did.
But also, she was brought along in this wartime environment,
Mm-hmm.
and Sabine is not in that environment, and she has no clue how to train somebody, that because her training was so drastically different from anything that she would try to pass along. And so I think some of the hesitancy comes from that. But I also think like they go into some of the more psychological aspects of this too, which is just like her master turned to the dark side, and he did so when she wasn't around. And I think there's just this burden and this
Guilt.
guilt associated with that. And uh, if this episode is unsuccessful in any way, it's that they don't really convey why the two of them weren't together in the Siege of Mandalore. Um, he was murdering younglings. he was murdering he
Yeah.
was murdering kids at the exact moment when she's like on in that scene, and she's like, "Oh, I don't remember this. I wasn't here, was I?" And it's like, "Yeah, no, you were off killing people."
That was it. That
She,
was the other tip of, that this was actually Anakin. Um,
yeah, yeah.
and to that point, that was the other thing with these Clone Wars flashbacks that was teaching Ahsoka, is that we all have this. We all put ourselves into this ideal of, this is the person that I want to be. This is, I want, name the values that you want to represent. And then it worries us, and we're ashamed of when we fall short of that ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And what these flashbacks to me was like, yes, you are more than that. But basically it was like, embrace all of yourself and give yourself grace that you are, accept all the parts of you. There are parts, yeah, I want to be the kind of person that people say, he's a nice guy. But you know what? There's times where I flip people off when they cut me off in traffic, or there's, times where I'm like, well, that guy's a jerk. It's like I fall short of that. But that is part of me, and I have to accept that, and I have to deal with it and learn, how to control it. It's kind of like, you know, when Yoda went to Dagobah for the first time in season 6 of the Clone Wars, you know, he had to deal with his hubris. That was part of the training, you know, that he had to deal with the evil side of him and learn how to control it. And that was what, because I love the line that Anakin said. He goes, "Yeah, you're more than that because I'm more than that." You know, he was giving him. He's like, they didn't make Anakin out to be Saint Peter. You know what I mean? Like, you know, totally redeemed. Everything is good. They embraced the fact that he was both had evil and good in him.
You have to. You absolutely have to. And uh, Luke, everyone's hero, failed in Last Jedi, and he tore himself to pieces over it. And like that was the storyline that we got, and a lot of people hated that we got that storyline. But this is the exact same thing here.
Which is, I'm
And
so
this,
glad that Lucasfilm didn't then like get gun shy and try to make Anakin into Santa Claus. So
right.
keep on going.
Yeah, this is the same thing here, and especially as it pertains to Ahsoka, he's imparting on her like, do not tear yourself to pieces over this. Any mistakes that you have made are part of you. You can accept that, and you can learn from them, and you can learn from the mistakes that I've made as well. And it's such a more healthy, evolved position to take than the position that Luke eventually takes. And what it tells me is that like Filoni's paying attention. And again, like he doesn't come at this thinking, I've got it all figured out. I've got Star Wars figured out to a T. Ha ha ha. Look at me. I'm so smart. No, like Ryan Johnson comes in with, in what my estimation is borderline brilliant Star Wars story. And Filoni thought, wow, I can learn from this. And I think like art imitates life in this way, where Ahsoka is in the position of learning how to be a teacher, learning how to embrace a different role and actually embrace life and not just be afraid of making mistakes or afraid of engaging with people. No, you gotta get back out there.
Yeah, and again, to the teaching part of things, you know, Fredo, you were mentioning it a little bit. Um, you have to be, as a teacher, you have to be comfortable in your own skin. You have to recognize your strengths. You have to, but the thing is, you also, and I said it before, you have to commit. Bad teachers are teachers who are there to collect a paycheck and be done when the bell rings. You know, good teachers are the ones who they worry about their kids, but they still get to class the next day and, you know, do the things to and Ahsoka was showing a little bit of this early in an earlier episode when she said, "I just need Sabine to be herself." You know, so there was cracks in the wall, but she had to fully commit to, do you want to teach, or do you want to sell insurance? Because if you want to sell insurance, go. You know, that's fine, but don't half McClunky this. So what was really cool, so, you know, I love the fact that we have younger Ahsoka saying, "Yeah, Anakin, you become more powerful and dangerous than anybody ever thought about," and that's when he goes all Vader on her. And we get kicked back into, it's Rosario fighting with, there's a little bit of young Ahsoka and Anakin fighting. I guess we could say it was Vader at this point, because like I said, he was all dark side at this point. And I love the moment when Rosario Ahsoka turns the tables on him and has his red lightsaber up to his throat and leans in with a grimace, and then backs off and turns the lightsaber off and throws it off the ledge. It was like,
Sympathize.
yeah, I mean, she showed that, yes, I have the Sith in myself, but I'm making a choice to not use it. Anakin made a choice to use it, you know, in Revenge of the Sith. She recognizes it's there and can control it. and chucks the lightsaber off. And then they did a beautiful job with the effects of shifting back to from evil Vader to good looking Hayden. So good.
Yeah, and
So good.
yeah, and I think that was one of the more interesting aspects of that whole turning the tables is because when he's talking to her about how she's more than she thinks he is because he was more, all I kept thinking of was the line Yoda gives Luke at the end of the Last Jedi about the burden of all masters that your student will at some point outgrow you. But what was interesting is in that it's almost like she had been carrying that burden of being Darth Vader's Padawan, much the same way as Luke and Leia carry the burden of being his children, not realizing that, yeah, you do have that in you, but that's not all he was. If all you define him as this one thing, yeah, you're right, he's fully evil. He was an evil person. But there was also all this good in him as well that Luke ultimately found. And I think that's the moment when Ahsoka reconnects with the good of Anakin Skywalker, her master, because she's able to look at him square in the eye, saying, "Yeah, I got the same darkness in me that you had in you because you trained me, but I also got all the good that you put in me, that you trained me to believe in, and that's what I'm holding on to." So I think it was really well done at that moment because that's the moment that Darth Vader goes away and
Yeah.
Anakin comes back.
We have a hard time accepting, maybe accepting is a bad word, or recognizing the duality within people. And the one thing that came to my mind as you were talking, Fredo, was the actor who originally portrayed Thomas Jefferson in Hamilton. In a documentary of this, he was like, it's like you have this guy who writes the Declaration of Independence and writes all these great things, but he also owns slaves. So yeah, he did these great things over here, but he still sucked. The two things can exist in the same world. But we have a hard time. It's like, no, he's either on a pedestal or in the crapper. And now Darth Vader slaughtered kids. It's like it's so the scales are kind of balanced, are kind of out of balance, no matter how much good he does. He that's still, but I mean there's still the good part that is of Anakin Skywalker, and the badness of Darth Vader. Those two things can exist in the same universe. And we have a hard time reconciling those things. And that's what Ahsoka, I think that was the final lesson to her, was that you can have both yes, you're a warrior. You were raised as a warrior, but you're also these other things, and don't forget that. And the warrior does not necessarily make you bad.
Star Wars has its roots in mythology and Joseph Campbell and these sorts of archetypes, these ideas of broad ideas of good and evil, and what I've always loved, perhaps most about Star Wars, is that it examines those sorts of ideas up close and personal through its characters, and it's not just an archetype. It's like flesh and blood. It's a person that you can relate to. It's Luke. It's like, the guy who craves excitement, and the guy who stands up to his father and makes the right choice at the end of Return of the Jedi. He does the right thing. And I feel like what we're getting in this episode is some of the best Star Wars we've ever gotten. It's a lot of it comes down to these questions of morality and these questions of duality, and it's like nobody's 100% perfect, nobody's 100% good.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the choices that we make that define us, and no one's going to get every choice that they make 100% correct, but there are going to be times that we get it wrong. But it's the summation at the end. Like it's like, all right, are you gonna become a force ghost, or are you gonna not become a force ghost at the end of your life? Like that's the actual, you know, flesh and blood example of what the lessons are supposed to be here. It's the same as most any major religion you can think of. Um, a lot of laws typically trend in this direction, but it's this idea of right, wrong. Do more right than you do wrong, and uh, do your best to be a good person. And so these stories resonate on that level. And again, like it's from an early age. It's not something that's complicated. When
Yeah.
you're 7 years old, you can grasp that. It's like, yes, I, I sometimes I curse under my breath at my parents, or sometimes I throw a spitball at the teacher when they're not looking. But more often than not, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I taking care of my business, and am I taking care of the people around me? And these are these important sorts of lessons that you can take
Do you sit at
from
the red
Star
light at 5
Wars.
a.m. when nobody's around? Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of 7-year-olds, let's talk about Jason a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
Because at first, well, so first of all, I mean, to the rest of us, we all know he's Kanan Jarrus's son and Hera's son. So the fact that he is force sensitive is like, okay, that's like, there's just that's the natural ability that's passed down that Sabine doesn't have. Um, so he is, it's interesting because he's like, Mom, there's something going on out here. And she's like, oh, Jason just blah, blah, blah. And he's like, Mom, come here and listen. There's something weird about the water. And so there's this whole thing going back and forth. And he finally and Hera finally, I think, realizes, oh crap, his dad was a Jedi. So maybe I should listen to him for a second. Um, this scene in here is pivotal for the entire episode because, and for what's to come, we're going to talk about Purgle here in a little bit, but this is when it's like the good guys stop focusing on their tech and start trusting in the living force, whether they're force users or not, because it's Jason saying, listen to the water. And he was literally hearing the battle between Ahsoka and Anakin. But again, it wasn't that he saw a vision. It wasn't that they weren't using a map. They weren't using the scanner that Hera had. It wasn't the X-Wings flying around. It was listening to the water. And that was a very telling thing. And by the way, and before I hang up on this point and have you guys talk about it, I love the fact that, again, Carson Teva is like, what just happened here? And that's when Huyang said, oh, Jason's dad was a Jedi, Kanan Jarrus, and so he just used the Force basically. And Carson was like, "Okay." I mean, it was the explanation that everybody needed, and it was fine. It was like, "Okay, got it. We can move on now." But anyway, what do you guys think about this whole Hera Jason moment?
Yeah. No, I found it to be interesting, and sometimes, it's funny. I was just thinking of parents and kids, and how a lot of times it's the kids who are paying, kids by their nature tend to be way more receptive to things, way to be more observant of things. They have fewer preconceived notions, so therefore they're more accepting of whatever they're seeing as a matter of fact. So the fact that it was Jason who was just sitting there by the beach, attuned to the living force and listening to all this makes sense. And I mean, of course, it helps that yes, he is the son of Cain, and yes, he's probably have a strong link with the Force. It only further reinforces all that. Uh, because not even Chopper was picking any of that up, in his sensors. So it's only when Hera is able to stop talking, stop moving, stop trying to figure out, stop trying to be Hera and just be in the moment like Jason is, that she's able to connect to what she's hearing, and then she goes, "Oh, this is what's happening." So
And the music was
there must be an
killer.
interest over the water.
Music was
Mhm,
killer at
mhm.
this point, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And so I enjoyed it for that little moment because obviously in this situation, it's not going to be the tech, it's not going to be uh, all the ships and all the sensors and all the stuff, which I think it's an element of the story that we've gotten so far, and it's only going to get even bigger as we head towards the climax or the conclusion of the story about how the connection to the Force matters. It's not just what you can do with all your toys; it's about connecting with the world around you.
I love that point, and I think that's going to become important again as we progress here when we start talking about Pearl. But like also, um, it's emotional to see him in live action and to see him manifest the Force in this manner. Um, there is a moment where I think the Force theme plays,
Yeah.
or at least
Hmm.
one of the major themes from the
It
original
was the
Star Wars
Force theme.
plays.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's just, like, oh man, that's there he is right there. And like one of you guys, one of you jerks was on about how like is he in Luke's Jedi temple when they burn the thing down. But so that's all I can think of now whenever I see him on screen.
Well,
um
I think about that
but
with everybody who become, hey, I'm a Jedi now. It's like, oh man, what 30 years from now, what's going on? Because, you know,
yeah, yeah, but like that, to that point though, like him, and then Ahsoka and Anakin, we've not seen their relationship on screen in live action before this episode. That's a really big deal for a lot of people. And I thought that it was perfect.
well,
I mean, it was on point, exactly what you would expect it to be.
the other big point about it too is that of this scene was that Hera could hear it as well. And so it was
Mhm.
a reminder to all of us that,
Yeah.
Sabine can do this if she gives herself over to, and opens herself up. Because that's when Hera finally is like, all right, what am I listening for? And she just, Carson, butt out for a second. I'm going to listen to my son. I'm going to do what he tells me. And then she could hear that. So it was a reminder to all. So I thought it was a very powerful, like I said, a good reminder that, yes, the force is within all of us. And, you know, so, all right. I thought it was really funny. I put in here in our notes, wade in the water. The idea of baptism and confirmation just is hit over the head to the point where Ahsoka is dunked in water and comes out, and she's, a bright light is shining on her, and then she's wearing white. You know, you don't need to be. This is like symbolism 101, folks. But and we don't need to talk about like the Gandalf the Gray and Gandalf the White because it was the same thing, but this was a little bit more hit over the head. But really well done. But the thing that I want to point out is that Ahsoka's demeanor is totally different from here on out. Yeah, you couldn't see Fredo, but
Really?
she's just like, it's like she took all the gummies. She's all good, you know.
Serenity now.
You know,
Serenity now.
um so anyway, I just wanted to hit on that. It was like, but it was necessary, right? It was, to show that it's showing that, hey, we got a different person game plan here. So again, getting back to don't trust the tech. They're actually, the tech they need is busted. The map is busted in half. But Ahsoka realizes what we talked about last week. I think it was off. It was after we hit, stop on the recording. But let's go talk to some Purgle. They can jump, between galaxies. And so she does the same thing that Ezra did. She talks to the
Mhm.
Purgle, through the Force. And then we get the Pinocchio moment. And so, first of all, again, the visual effects here are incredible. Um, it was so good. Um, and it was really the first time that Ahsoka didn't rely on a lightsaber or a battle. She was using the Force for knowledge and defense.
It represents growth for her. I mean, like again, like she's um she walked away from the Jedi Order for a reason, right? Which was that she thought they were failing her. She thought they were failing other people. She thought that it was the war organization at that point. It's like, no, I don't want any part of this. She walks away from it. Now what? And I don't know that she ever did the work of the now what part.
Yeah.
She wandered the galaxy and got into adventures. Like there's a Mandalorian series featuring Ahsoka out there somewhere that we haven't seen yet. But
like came from Kung Fu.
Exactly. She never did the work, really, as far as we know. And so, like these sorts of steps are really critical for her to see them unfold in this way. It's like, yes, you don't have to just like fight as Anakin might have taught you. There are other ways for you to be true to yourself and for you to pass on what you've learned to other people. It doesn't revolve around fighting. And like you said, Aaron, with the whole thing with Jason and him teaching his mom, you can be in touch with the things around us. Look, and Ahsoka in this instance is basically learning from Ezra. Like, why was Ezra talking to those whales all the dang time? Well, he threw Thrawn halfway across the galaxy. Okay. Or into a different galaxy. Okay. Maybe there's something to that, right? Like it doesn't occur to anyone else that they might also be able to do something along those lines, or that's only the purview of Ezra. Is he the Emperor now? It's like, no, it doesn't make sense for him to be like this all-powerful pedestal person. It's like, no, there's a path in front of you and you can follow it and you can achieve things that don't involve swinging a lightsaber around. And so, like, yes, I really appreciate that that's where we landed here.
And I love how it ends exactly like Empire Strikes Back. Yeah, exactly like Empire. She says, Hera will find him, I promise. And right before Lando and Chewie jump into hyperspace, to go find Han, I mean, that was the same back and forth, and then Luke's was the thing Luke says, may the force be with you. That's what Hera says. And by the way, on a tangent, after this episode, I'm even more convinced that she's hitting Hera out of the park now. This was even more representative of what I know Hera to be. So anyway, I mean, yeah, that's where we're at. So we've jumped to somewhere with the Purgle. So we'll find out maybe next week.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it such an interesting moment after she comes out of the water. Which, by the way, I thought, okay, so was that the world between worlds? Really? Did she actually cross? Does it really matter on a metaphysical level? No, because what matters is the inward journey that Ahsoka went through. Coming to terms with the totality of who she's been and who she is and who she's trying to be. And I think that's why when she comes out of the water, she's a completely different person. Like I said, like she took all the gummies and she's chiller and chill. But it also allows her the opportunity to just see things for what they are. She finds the two halves of the broken map, and she cut the deuces mighty quickly through the force. And yeah, Sabine's in the ship with Balin's call with Morgan, but she went with them. And so naturally, then she goes, well, wait a minute, why are they here? Why is this map situated here? Well, it's not because the map structure was here, it's because the Purgle are here. And everybody who mapped in hyperspace lanes did so because the Purgle were showing them their route, so to speak. It's like if you were to follow pods of sea whales of whales down an ocean, and you're like, okay, these are the best routes to take. So naturally, go talk to the experts who done this and see if they can offer their hand. And it's a good, again, like I said, not non-combative, non-destructive way of resolving the issue and the pergola part. And I just love the moment Carson T was coming to explain this to the Republic captain that they sent to arrest Hera and Ahsoka, and he goes, "Okay, I'm gonna tell you, but you're not gonna believe me." And sure enough, they don't believe her until the Purgle jumped to hyperspace.
I've seen some critique of this too from mostly people who haven't watched Rebels. Um, oh, space whales, her. Um, I will just remind that we had a freaking space slug in Empire Strikes Back.
Right.
You talk about the end of Empire Strikes Back. This is like a perfect callback to
So
Empire Strikes Back. So like, if you did not like you the hand puppet in
yes,
space, and yeah, it's kind of cheesy, right? Um, the point is, it's been here since 1980. Like, get used to it.
but
If you're not used to it by now,
to that point, you know, it was funny because it's funny you say that because Britt has not watched any of Rebels.
right?
She's heard me talk about, you know, these things, and when the Purgle first came on screen, you know, in a couple episodes ago, um, but after that happened, her like right away she said, I think it's really cool that there's an organic being that can jump hyperspace. That was her reaction.
Yeah,
You know, and
yeah.
that's like, yeah, so the people who are, I mean, I think maybe when that episode of Rebels came out, I was like, really? I mean, it was weird. I mean, it was admittedly weird, but it just, but the way they
It's
tell that,
canon.
the way they tell the story, it makes sense. Much to Fredo's, you know, point. It's like, how did, how did most of our, highways and interstates get laid out? You follow the waterways, or, you follow the migration paths of, name it.
Bison,
Yeah.
yeah, buffalo,
When I
right?
yeah, when I hiked the mountain this summer, it was like not a random path that somebody created 12 days ago. It was a path that's been there for thousands of years. I mean, like, that's literally
This is
what
the
it
way to
is,
go. Yeah. This
you
is the
know.
way.
You're
So
inventing that wheel. No, if you're trying to figure out what other people have figured out because it's probably the smartest way to go about things. And yeah, so it's not surprising that in this regard, it's not necessarily a human or a bipedal intelligence. It's the Purgle who have figured it out, and they're showing everybody else. So of course they're going to be the ones to take her. And yeah, it's an interesting moment that finally Ahsoka is able to connect with the Purgle in the way that Ezra was able to connect in a much easier way, which also goes to show that that connection to the living force exhibits itself in different ways. People don't necessarily all have the same talent base. Some people are connected and attuned in some ways, like Ezra was to animals, and some are connected in other ways, like Ahsoka or Anakin or Obi-Wan. It's different for everybody. And so sometimes, I mean, when you think of somebody like Sabine, maybe her connection to the force is a completely different connection. And it's just a question of finding for her to find out what that connection is, for her to be able to connect to the force.
The final question is, do you think that when Hayden Christensen said a boat, do you think that was a directorial? It's like, yeah, let's go more Canadian on that, or do you think they should have stepped in and said, hey, maybe a little less Canadian? But anyway, that was just kind of funny to me. It stuck out when he was like, is this what this is all about? I'm like, all right. So, yeah, dude's from Anakin
No, at that
Skywalker
little
from Toronto. Um, but
that little moment was just that was vintage episode three Anakin.
yeah,
Even with the boat, it was just the way he delivered that. You totally felt that's the same Anakin we've seen all along, and I think that goes to not only the quality of his acting, but also to the way that Dave Filoni shot that moment and the way that everything kind of came together.
my
It made it feel like it wasn't like it could have been any moment in Clone Wars or in Episode 3.
my final point here, as we just wrap this up, my final point is I want to say um, Hayden Christensen knocked it out of the park.
yeah,
He did a great job of marrying his portrayal in episode 2 and 3 with what Matt Lanter did in the Clone Wars.
yeah.
And it actually talk about the redemption of Anakin Skywalker. I am not a fan of the Anakin Skywalker from episodes 2 and 3. We've talked. I'm just because I think he was poorly written, and poorly directed.
Poorly
Um,
directed. Yeah.
and it
He's
was
not bad. He's just drawn that way.
yeah, and this was the redemption of Anakin Skywalker in like 40 minutes. Um, so I like some, but Hayden just, but of course that's
Mhm.
also then I stop and think it's like, man, he was young when he did episode 2 and episode 3, and here here I am cutting him down, for you know there's a lot of things that go into portraying a character. So, but I mean, all that being said, like I said, this is like I just thought he knocked it out of the park.
It is not rewriting history to say that you like what he's doing now, as opposed to what we saw in episodes 2 or 3, because like a lot of people want to like bag on him continuously till the end of the time, I think. But like, it's like if you didn't like what he did, um, to your point, I think a lot of that was writing and direction, but also like divorce yourself from that opinion for a moment and give him a chance in this,
Mm-hmm.
and just try to evaluate it based on what we saw, because like it was really good. To your point, he married what he had previously done with uh humanity. He's no longer a robot. um and with the performance that we saw in the animated series, um as well. So and like conveyed the weight of this and the importance of this relationship that, like to my point earlier, we've not seen in live action before. Was able to just carry that off beautifully, and Rosario as well, the two of them. But um I thought he did great, and it just this whole episode to me again is just a beautiful gift to Rebels fans, and to also Clone Wars fans, because it's just chef's kiss. They put so much care into this, and I have great um, expectation for the rest of this series, and I have great faith in Filoni to continue to be a part of this universe.
Yeah, I think in some ways this episode acts as the monument, the coda of Ahsoka and Anakin. We saw them, their relationship begin in the very first episode of the movie, the Clone Wars movie. And we've seen that story go through its ups and downs through Clone Wars, Rebels, through all these media. And this is the final moment with, both of them can kind of come together one last time and leave on good terms. And you get the sense that Ahsoka, whatever happens going forward, has made her peace with who Anakin Skywalker both was to her and to everybody else. And kudos again, like everybody said, kudos to Hayden Christensen. I think much the same way, uh, when a chef puts the ingredients together and gives them time to marry, he's finally had the time to marry all these various aspects of what the character was, and that allowed him to step in at this moment and feel like he could actually bring in all these various aspects. Because let's face it, episodes 2 and 3 are snapshots. They're moments in time of his long story of the life of Anakin Skywalker that we got to see through the 6 episodes of the saga, plus all the ancillary properties. So this is an opportunity where we can finally get to say goodbye to him in a way which feels appropriate. So if we never see him again, he goes on a high.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And one last brief point: season 7 of the Clone Wars. Um, if you watched this episode and you didn't know what was going on or had questions, you get to see Ahsoka and Anakin, their stories intersect and play out in conjunction at the end, at the end of their relationship. And that stuff probably I haven't gone back and watched yet, but like in the wake of watching this episode now, I think like that stuff's just gonna be even that much more powerful.
Yep. And so, I mean, I have a feeling that the next episode's going to be all the bad guys. We need to know what's going on with them. Also came to the realization we got 3 episodes left. I don't think we're going to get any sort of closure on anything with Grand Admiral Thrawn. and it makes sense if he is going to be, as reported, the big baddie in that Filoni movie. I don't know if that's confirmed, but that would make sense. But that's not Thrawn is not Thrawn is the MacGuffin of this. So, but anyway, that being said,
Thrown into this series what Luke was in a way to Episode 7.
yeah,
He's what everybody's mentioning, but we're
yeah.
probably not going to get much the same
So,
way. We're gonna get, as we got Luke at the very last shots. We're gonna get Thrawn in the last episode, and that's gonna be
so
it.
that's when the net nerds are going to go nuts. Is when we only get like about 5 minutes of Grand Admiral Thrawn and then credits. But anyway, with that, let us know what you're thinking of Ahsoka. If you're liking as much as we are, and but otherwise, we'll be back next week with another episode review. So until then, we will say who dat.
Who dat?
Who dat?
Everybody have a great week.
McConkey.